Hi Humany viewers! So you might remember that back in April, I made this video talking about how Baby Shark is going to overtake Despacito as the most viewed YouTube video on the entire platform. And since it's been about 4 months since then, now it's August 22nd, 2020, I want to make an update prediction video about when I think the crossover date is finally going to happen. So as an update, Despacito now has 6.9 billion views, and the new dark horse, the new competitor on the block, Baby Shark, has 6.3 billion. So the gap, why can I not select correctly? There's the number. The gap has shrunk from what used to be about 1.6 billion to about 0.6 billion. So using the Wayback Machine, looking at snapshots of this Wikipedia article, which is list of most viewed YouTube videos, you can see the chart here, I have a bunch of data points over various dates from about October 2018 to now. And I recorded both Baby Shark's rank, which goes up from 34th to 2nd. By the way, Despacito was always first over this time period. And then I also have the number of views that Baby Shark and Despacito both had. And then using a bunch of very simple math, I calculated, what the gap was at that time, how much the gap had shrunk since the last data point, how many days had passed since the last data point. You can divide these two numbers to get the average shrinkage per day, as in how much does the gap shrink every 24 hours that pass over that time period. And then if you assume that that shrinkage rate is constant, then you can divide the, I messed up. You can divide the current gap size by the shrinkage per day rate to get an estimate for how many days are going to happen until the crossover moment. So this can be shown more graphically with this line graph, where Despacito's views are in red and Baby Shark's are in blue. And it's very clear to see that Baby Shark is both growing a lot faster in general, but is also curving up, as in the rate of growth, the derivative of the blue line, is increasing, whereas for Despacito, the derivative, the rate of growth, is decreasing. So I want to point out what this estimated date of crossover column really means. So if you look at the data only going up to January 15th, 2019, and you look at the velocities at that moment and just extrapolate, assume that they're going to get the views at the same rate forever, then you can estimate that the crossover will happen on March 17th, 2032. That's really far away. That's 12 whole years. I'll be 35. It'll be the day before my 35th birthday. Anyway, what that means visually or geometrically is if you look at this graph, imagine that you can only see everything in the graph up until this vertical line right here. As in, everything to the right of it is in the future, so we can't technically see it. Now, if you look at the slope of the red line at the start and the blue line at the start, they look about the same. They're almost parallel. So if you just kind of project them outward, extrapolate, they'll probably go a very long time until they actually meet and cross. And that's why the date is so far in the future. It would actually take another 13 years from that moment until they meet. But as the months wore on and as Baby Shark's rate kept increasing, you can imagine that like halfway through, if you were to extrapolate the lines, they'd cross much sooner. And so the date that the crossover happened kept coming closer, which is really interesting because our current position in time is moving forward, but the estimated date of crossover is moving backward. So eventually they have to cross, right? Eventually we'll hit that crossover date and Baby Shark will become the most viewed YouTube video. So anyway, okay, I did put in this Carrie's guess of when I think the crossover is going to happen, November 4th, 2020. And I want to point out that, okay, if you look at the last 3 crossover dates, you can see that it says November 10th, 2020. That's what you'd guess back in April. Then it says November 6th, then it says November 1st. So you might be under the impression that every couple months that happens and we get a new data point, the estimated date of crossover moves back about 4 or 5 days. So if you were naively thinking like, oh, this is just a pattern, you might think that we should move back another 4 or 5 days before the next data point, which would take us to about October 27th, 2020. But I want to point out that the only reason that the prediction date is moving backward is because The concavity, or second derivative of the blue graph, is positive, meaning it's curving upward. And if we assume that the second derivative stays constant, meaning the concavity will stay exactly the same and it'll keep curving up at the same rate, then it might make sense to just assume that this date will constantly move backward at a constant rate. But we don't have perfect knowledge of all the social forces and environmental forces that are causing baby shark's view gettage to increase. What I'm saying is, I wouldn't be surprised if the blue graph started curving down or stayed linear. What I'm thinking is, okay, there's a lot of little kids who are probably going to go back to school in August and September, and that's the main demographic who's viewing this video. So that might cause the blue graph to curve down slightly. In addition, there was a subscriber war that really happened between PewDiePie and T-Series that pushed PewDiePie upward and essentially forced back that crossover date much further. So that could happen again here, especially as we get much and much closer and the gap gets much smaller. But I think it would be much harder for the vigilantes to push Despacito up. And that's because for the subscriber war, you're only really talking about maybe 80,000 new subscriptions per day. But for the most viewed video, we're talking about 10 million views a day. So there's going to have to be a lot more people who are committed to the cause almost religiously to have any noticeable effect on this graph. So I don't think that it can last as long. And that's why I'm only pushing the date forward 3 days. So that's me kind of taking into account the factors of kids going back to school and the possible vigilantes who prefer Despacito over Baby Shark. So I think that this date is interesting. It's the day after the 2020 presidential election in the United States, so it'll be a very tumultuous time. By the way, I really hope that the Postal Service will survive until then. Save the Postal Service. But a lot of things will happen. It'll be a very tumultuous month. And I think, there's a very good chance that I'm off by a week or two in either direction. But I would be surprised if I were off by more than 2 weeks, just given by how consistent and slowly changing these lines are. It looks like there would be nothing crazy that would cause a huge spike in either of their graphs. So I think that November 4th, 2020 is what I, Carrie KH, am predicting will be the crossover date between Baby Shark and Despacito, made on August 22nd, 2020. Today is August 22nd, 2020, and if you don't believe me, why am I doing this? This is just to prove to you that in case you ever see this in the future, it's August 22nd, 2020. And also, back in April, I had made my prediction to be January 2021, so I do admit I was wrong in that sense. But, as new data comes in, we have to change our predictions of the future, so I'm not really disappointed about that. Yeah, so that's what I feel about the current situation. Also, they are both getting very close to the world population. I think it's going to be a race to see who can get there first, but almost certainly Baby Shark's going to beat it. Because if you look at this graph, I'm working with OBS and Google Sheets. It's kind of cumbersome. The world population, which is about 7.5 billion, is sitting at about where my cursor is now, there. And there's just too much momentum on the blue line. It's just going to blast right past the red line until it hits 7.5 billion right there. So, but once a video hits the world population, that's really interesting because then you can state that the average living person on Earth has watched Baby Shark exactly once. And of course that's an average, so that means that some people on Earth have watched it dozens of times. A bunch of other people have watched it 0 times. So it's a false claim to claim that every human on Earth will have watched Despacito or Baby Shark. That's just not true, and that's probably never going to happen for the history of humanity. But I still think that passing the world population, just so you can reach that average human watching it once, is still a pretty cool milestone that Baby Shark is definitely going to have. Okay, this video's been going on too long. I still think that this little chart here is really cool. Remember it, okay? And remember the graph. Oh, that keeps not working. Yeah. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye!